think that we are so afraid to be authentic. We try to be someone we're not, or we try to protect ourselves. And I think being vulnerable and being authentic are two things that we are so afraid of, but yet is the key to finding connection and that juicy, gooey, passionate, like all the things that make life just so worth living for. But we're so afraid of rejection that we're not even willing to open our heart, to take the risk. Because yeah, you know what? Love and loss go hand in hand. And we're so afraid of loss that we're not even willing to experience. You know, I think about entrepreneurship in the same way. You know, yeah, sure, I could live in my little hole in my, 6-figure job and just keep doing what I'm doing, but where's the joy? Where's the life? Where's the adventure in that? So here I am on this crazy ass roller coaster that does like loop the loops, and I'm screaming, I'm crying, I'm like, why did I even get on this ride sometimes? But that's what life is about, is for me anyway, is that experience of life. I don't want to die being like, I've never loved, I've never felt what it's like to be so soul bearing to someone, and they can see right into my soul and they're like, you know what? You're perfect just the way you are. Even if you don't think so, I do. And so, my husband, the way he looks at me, I don't get it. Personally, he looks at me like I'm, but I really get it's not about this skin bag that I'm in. It's not about that. It's really he connects to who I am deep down. And it's up to me to open that up and allow him in. But I feel like, so many of us, if we've experienced heartbreak, whether it's from our parents and watching them, or we've experienced our own heartbreak, we then make decisions about, no, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to be that vulnerable. I'm never going to let anyone hurt me. And it's just so sad because we miss out on so much when we are so guarded. I love working with men. And I think it's because I've worked with men for so much of my life that I get them. And I find myself defending men a lot to women, and women always go, well, that's not an excuse. I was like, well, it's not an excuse. And I think what's missing in this world, there's so much what you just said that was so juicy. I want to say two things. I think acceptance is so important. Not only acceptance with our partner and loving them just the way they are, but really it starts with us accepting who we are, accepting our humanity, accepting that we're not perfect. Because when we can do that, then we have so much more space and empathy and compassion for other people. And so oftentimes when people say to me, well, I can't accept my partner just the way they are, my first question is, okay, so what is it over here that you need to do work on for yourself? Where is it that you haven't accepted yourself? And then the tears come. And I think a lot of it comes from control. We so badly, talking about executives and, these high achievers who are so great at business and they have the cars and the house and everything. And yet there's this part in their heart that's missing. It's because this thing called money or success, they can control it. They feel powerful. They feel like they're in the driver's seat. But when it comes to relationships that are volatile at best, and you're dealing with another human being who's got their own stuff going on, you can't control that. And so we want to stay over here where we can control and try to avoid that. And that's why people who have, relationship issues tend to throw themselves into work when this isn't working. But it just makes things worse.
Because work is something that they can control, and they've learned that they can't control another person, even though, going back to what you're saying, like, I want, them to fix you. But that's control speaking at the end of the day. Right. And what's interesting when you said that, like, how come, the male or this person can't do X, Y, and Z. And then you said, well, what is it about, yourself that you disagree on or you're not happy with right? Maybe it's a question they haven't really asked themselves. And I find that for the most part, it's really not them talking. It's actually, growing up, their parents have laid down some judgments or expectations, their
Mm-hmm.
community, school, cultural, things, that
Mm-hmm.
come into play. Do you unpack, those items with them?
Absolutely. So yeah, talking a little bit about my work, one of the things what I do is actually quite unique. You know, first of all, relationship coaching is a fairly new thing. Counseling and therapy has been around for a long time, but coaching has only been available to the public for just the last, I don't know, 10, maybe 20 years. Um, but one of the unique things that I do is not only I combine life coaching with relationship coaching. So I don't just address the relationship issues that they deal with. I start with the human being. Because one of the things I find is a lot of couples who are unhappy, it's because they're not happy with their own life. They hate their
Hmm.
job, they have no self care regimen, they don't have quality time for each other. And so when
Hmm.
we can start to really fill their own personal love tank, if you want to call that,
Hmm.
then when we
Hmm.
go to do the relationship stuff, they're a lot more well equipped to
Mm.
take on the stuff around the relationship. And of course, it's all around communication. But I find that just dealing with the communication, or sorry, just dealing with the relationship is only the symptom. It's
Hmm.
not the
Hmm.
actual cause and reason why they're
Mm.
having the problems.
Hmm. Yeah, so I would say if it starts with the individual, then that could mean a whole bunch of stuff, right? That could mean like,
Yes,
therapy, that could mean,
yes.
all different kinds of self-care regimens, that could
Mommy,
mean
daddy issues.
mommy daddy issues that
Yes,
ultimately needs time. It needs
yes.
time, it needs processing. Um, and I would argue, it also needs some time to be single as well, and not being with another person, because I'm sure you've had clients where they are serial monogamers. They just jump from one person to another person to another person, and they've actually haven't had time to be by themselves. And I think there's a lot of value to be by yourself, for a period of time, right? Some people
Mm-hmm.
are okay with that. Some people aren't. I've seen in every single way. I personally have found tremendous value with being in solitude.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is, not actively dating, not actively being in a relationship, things like that, and just being, on your own. And at first, you could experience, periods of loneliness. But, for myself, I was able to travel around the world, humbly speaking. And I realized how important solitude was. I realized how important just being by myself is just tremendous value for me. And for me, it brought a better version of myself to whoever that person is that I'm
Yes.
dating or going to meet, et cetera, et cetera. And this doesn't even have to be romantically. This could be applied towards platonic work relationships, business relationships, any kind of relationship at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point because I think oftentimes when we go into relationships, we lose ourselves. If we don't have a strong basis and a strong relationship with who we are, it's so easy to get caught up or, when people say things like, oh, they made me feel, they, they made me toxic or they kind of put the responsibility over with other people. But if
Hmm.
you are good with who you are, and you know what you're willing to put up, I don't want to say put up with, but what your standards are, what your expectations are, you can communicate that to people in a loving way and create boundaries so that you don't put yourself in these situations where you end up in a really unhealthy, toxic, lonely relationship. Making sure that your energy is right. Oftentimes
Hmm.
we're so, when we're single, we're so needy. It's like, I just want to be loved. And someone needs to make me happy. But it's like, no, you got to make yourself happy. And that energy that you put out in the world, that will attract the right person who says, wow,
Mm,
who is that has that amazing energy? And then you
mm,
can choose whether or not you want to bring them in or not.
mm. Hmm. Yeah, I would, I guess one of the questions, that I had is, for people that are single that go through that, I just want to be loved, or how come no one's with me and stuff like that. Do you say to them like, hey, obviously everyone's going to be an individual, answer, but do you say to them like, hey, we need the time and the process and the space to kind of show up and love and care for yourself first before you start attracting, that, is there like quote unquote a set of like homework or action steps or prescription, so to speak, for them to kind of go through that? Or do you just kind of work with them in terms of like, okay, let's find you Mr. or Miss, X, Y, and Z, and start working? Like, how do you deal with a single person?
Yeah. Well, first, I don't deal with single people. I only deal with married people.
Okay.
However, my best friend is single, and so we're always having this conversation. I think the first place I would start is, what are your goals? What is it that you want for yourself and your life? Money, health, all of that. Because when you can have all those pieces in an integrity, right? Then you can be really integrous with who you are, your values and your beliefs. And I think a lot of
Hmm.
people don't really think about what their values and beliefs are. So I think,
Hmm.
for me, I'm a big journaler. I like making lists. I like getting clarity on, like, okay, what is it that I want? Where do I see is in the way of that? How do I get support with that? And then, again, like, what are the beliefs and values that I have, so that, whether it's a friend, like a colleague, or it's a romantic partner you're trying to attract, you are clear about who you are and who you want in your life
Hmm.
and who you
Hmm.
don't. The one thing I would say is a lot of it is mindset, right? I think sometimes we, especially because we aren't great at communicating for the most part. We start to make up stories, or sometimes, one of the partners will shut down, what we call stonewall, or go through an emotional flooding, where they just kind of emotionally shut down, and then the other person starts to make up what's actually happening. They're like, oh, they don't love me anymore. Oh, they're rejecting me, or these things, and we just start to get caught up in all the worry and the paranoia.
Mm.
And what we don't realize is whatever your partner is going on emotionally has nothing to do with you. And I think oftentimes we make it our job to fix the
Mm.
other person. Oh, they're in pain. Oh, I got to go save them. No, 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 no.
Mm.
You don't. You just got to be their best friend. You just got to listen and be like, oh man, that sucks. I'm so sorry that you had a bad day today. I'm sorry that that person yelled at you. I'm sorry you're tired. Whatever that is. But I think oftentimes we go, well, what do you want me to do about it? Why is it my
Mm.
fault? Why are you yelling at
Mm.
me? When really this person just really just wants to be heard. And this is, before we'd say, oh, this is women, but I think men just as much want to feel heard and valued and appreciated and just acknowledged, and for someone to say, you know what? It's okay. It's okay that you don't feel 100% today. It's okay that you're emotional. I gotcha.
Mm.
Everything's going to be fine. I think that's
Mm.
what's missing for a lot of people. As far as consistency, absolutely. Me and my husband, so we've been together 15 years in total, and everything that we did since day one are the exact same things that we do today. We still
Mm.
text each other, I love you, when we're not together. We still say, I love you at least 3 times before we go to bed. We still dance around the kitchen and be silly. We still, make date night happen. We still have the same amount. Actually, we have more sex now, actually, now that I think about it. But it's always like, I think, talking about my first marriage, that was what was missing, to be honest, was the consistency. It was almost
Mm.
like as soon as we got married, it was almost like he said, I'm done. Check mark, got married, and then everything
Mm.
just fell away.
Mm.
And so everything that I
There was
thought
no
I was
keeping
getting,
up with it. There was no keeping up with it.
not at all. It was like I was married to someone that I didn't know, and it was
Mm.
very devastating because I thought I knew who I was marrying, and it was just kind of like it was the flyer. I was in love with the
The
idea,
concept. Yeah.
the concept, and the promises, but not the person who was actually willing to do the things that I felt I needed from a relationship. And I think another thing is communication. Communication,
Hmm.
communication is so,
Yeah.
so important. And the problem with this, the epidemic I see, is that people think that they communicate well and they actually don't. And they
Hmm.
go, oh, I can communicate. I can be honest. I said, well, that's not communication. That's talking. That's not communicating. If you're
Yeah.
interrupting, right? If you're interrupting, if you're judging, if you're comparing, if you're getting defensive, if you're reacting, that is not communication. You're like shut down. You're not actually with the other person.
Mm.
And this is something that I teach every single of my clients. And that's why I get them the results so quickly, because they realize that there's nothing wrong with the relationship. They just don't have the skills. And society hasn't taught us how to listen to one another,
Yeah.
to understand. We've only been taught to listen, to respond.
Hmm.
And
Active,
then,
active listening. Yeah.
and then there's the domination game. Who's right?
Yeah.
Who's wrong? Who's good? Who's bad? Add that all up. No wonder our divorce rates are what is that. So that's why I'm so passionate about this work.
Yeah, I think I don't see it as a tug of war, in my opinion. I see it as when I was growing up, one of my favorite, days of the year was field day. And that was, at the end of the year, it's a giant, obstacle course and your class just participates. That was field day. And one of my favorite, games growing up, and this is an analogy I'm going to apply, is the potato sack game, where, you and your partner, you both have one leg into a potato sack and you try to figure out how to walk across a field, together. So to me, it's almost like instead of a tug of war, which is also another game, it's the potato sack game, right? Where you figure out how to work with your partner. You realize that you can't do it by yourself. You have to do it with the other person. And, how do I take my individual nuances? How do I take him or hers individual nuances? And, bring us to the opposite side, which is
Yeah.
not to say that we're supposed to, go to a finish line, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, that's like, I like to call it Pleasure Island or Love Island, right? Like to the place where you want whatever that destination looks like. And for most people, people just want to be happy. People just want
Hmm.
partnership. People want a best friend that they can have and experience life with, all the ups and downs.
Hmm.
That's what we
Hmm.
want. The definition of responsibility is the ability to respond. So when we're in a place of disempowerment or blame or victimhood or complaining, right? It's all kind of the same bowl of wax. There's nothing we can do about it because we have it that the problem is outside of us, that we don't
Hmm.
have power, that it's over there with the other person.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
when we can be responsible and say, yeah, you know what? There was something that I've done to upset my partner, which is why they're shutting down.
Hmm.
What have I done, or what could I do to impact the situation so that we can get back on track, rather
Hmm.
than leaving it to the other person and being, well, our relationship is the way it is because you did that or you didn't do that, and here
Hmm.
I am being holy and mighty. And what I like to point to is that, sure, we can think that way, right? We can think that the problem is out there, and a lot of people do that. And then what they do is they get divorced and they move on to the next relationship. But, at the end of the day, if we can't take responsibility for ourselves and how we've impacted people, for example, sorry, I'm just jumping here. It's like building a fire, right? It's like there needs to be gasoline. I don't even know what I'm saying right now. You might want to edit this out.
We need a we need a
analogy.
flamethrower. We need like lots of wood. We need more forest fires. No, I'm
Well,
kidding.
it's like, it's like the gun, that gun analogy, right? Like the gun itself isn't dangerous. It's when you put bullets in it and there's someone that needs to fire it. And so oftentimes people go, well, it's the gun is the problem. Well, no, it's not. And oftentimes people don't want to take responsibility for having the gun, for shooting
Mhm.
it. They're just, it's the gun's problem. Does that make sense?
So in
I'm
terms
just
of
trying this out. I don't actually know if
in
it
terms
works.
of applying it to the relationship aspect, it's the user at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Are you're trying to say it's a user, right?
Well, it's if our if our partner is upset, and if we've said something to upset our partner, we need to take responsibility for us upsetting the partner. Because all
Mhm.
we want to focus on is, why are you upset with me?
Mm.
And why are you acting that way? It's like, hold on, let's take a step back. What did I say?
Mhm.
And where do I need to apologize? Where do I need to take responsibility? And sometimes, like, I think one of the great things that me and my husband do really well is we're really great at taking responsibility, even when it's not even ours to take. But it really
Mhm.
just adds to the power of our relationship moving forward, because we're both in it to win it without trying to take credit for it. Does that make sense?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. In a way, it kind of again, I think of it as like instead of the ping pong match between each other or the tug of war, where it's almost like you have two different individuals trying to make it work as opposed to both partners looking at it as a unit and say, whether it's your fault or my fault, let's just move on. Let's figure out how we can solve the problem together and continue to move on. That's what it sounds like to me, because it's more conducive, it's more productive at the end of the day. It's less
Yes.
heartache, it's less time wasted, in terms of, he said the blame game, right?
Yes.
Because I don't think anyone wins at the end of the day, because as much as, let's just say, you're not wrong, but you're blaming someone else at the end of the day, I feel that you're still suffering at the end of the day, because I mean, finger pointing, there's no fun in finger pointing, I think there's more fun
No.
in problem solving, as a group, as a
Yeah.
team.
Yeah. Pride and ego is so dangerous when it comes to relationships. I actually ran into a friend of mine who'd been married for, I think, 10 years, and I hadn't seen her for 10 years. And when I saw her and she told me that she'd gotten divorced, and I said, I'm just curious, why? And that's the two words she said to me: pride and ego. And I think that's
Mm,
kind of what you're pointing at, is sometimes we would rather not look bad than actually own up to our stuff. We don't
mm,
ever want to admit we're wrong. We don't ever want to admit that, we're human and make mistakes. We just want
mm-hmm,
to point the finger. And, I think apology and forgiveness is so important. And it's something that we don't talk about enough, is that,
mm-hmm,
is that we do need to ask for forgiveness. And it's not just I'm sorry. It's like, really, like, I'm so sorry that I let you down. I said I was going to go do that thing and I didn't do it. And now you're
mm,
disappointed in me. And now there's this impact on you.
mm-hmm,
And really, just that power of, like, being vulnerable, opening your heart and saying, listen, I messed up. And I
mm-hmm,
got that I hurt you. And I'm so sorry. Versus,
mm-hmm.
well, I said I was sorry. What more do you want from me? Right? That's not actually taking responsibility. And I think a lot of
Mm-hmm,
people are afraid. Because here's the thing: when you ask for forgiveness, it's scary, because when you say, will you forgive me, which sometimes is what's required, there's a chance of rejection.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And so
mm-hmm,
people won't even ask for forgiveness, when sometimes that's all it takes for someone to finally trust you again.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's back to
Which
being vulnerable again.
which
Mm.
circles back to your mom and dad. So,
Yeah.
so we'll close it right there. We can go forever. So I love this conversation. Thank you so much for spending the
You're
time out of your
welcome.
vacation. I don't want to take any more of your time, but if people are interested and curious and want to learn more, want to see how they can schedule an appointment, have you as their coach, etc., where can they go?
Right. So right now I have, my website is www.saveourmarriage.ca. I also do life coaching as well, but that's the website that I have right now. So they can just reach out to me from that site.
Okay. Okay. Great. And we'll have it on the show notes when it airs. So thank you so much.
You're
Again, it's
welcome.
been a pleasure. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'm glad that we've hit a lot of big points for people. And yes, please
Absolutely.
enjoy the rest. And thank you so much. So thank you for showing up and doing what you do.
Thank you, Colin. I appreciate you, and I thank you so much for this great conversation. I really hope that it was helpful to your listeners, and that that they get something out of this conversation.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm very grateful, and I know that they will as well. So, Guys, thank you so much for watching another episode of Thrive Bites. If you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you felt like this was a benefit for someone else, please let them know. And until then, please say goodbye to Janelle.